Welcome to another program of Klahanie, the Great Outdoors. I'm Stan Peters. Recently, our provincial government designated 10 new park areas in British Columbia. On Klahanie today, we're going to look at one of them, the St. Mary's Alpine Park in southeastern British Columbia. Here's Ben Metcalf with Klahanie's guest, naturalist and photographer Art Twomey.
My friend Art Twomey is a natural scientist, a geologist to be specific, and a filmmaker with a message. In these days when we are gradually losing our balance in nature, his message is extremely urgent. We must restore that balance and keep it. There are many corrective actions we can take, but one of them is to preserve the wilderness that is left to us. Art, welcome to Klahanie, but before we watch your film, tell us something of its history.
All right, Ben. I made this film a couple of years ago, before it actually was designated as a park, to take the people of BC, really, into a pristine wilderness area, to show them the wilderness values that are still extant there. We now have 10 new parks in BC, the Alpine, St. Mary's Alpine Park being one of them. It's a small park, only 22,000 acres, in a scenic climax area, up high, alpine, of course, 40-odd lakes in there, glaciated terrain, delicate, very delicate.
How far west of Kimberley is that, Art?
It's about 35 miles by an old dirt road.
And quite easily accessible?
It's accessible, even with a conventional car. Looking at the lakes from the air here, they're in a glaciated terrain, severely glaciated during the Pleistocene. Notice the high precipitous peaks composed of granite. You see, this is an area in a pristine state, as are many of the new parks that have been recently designated. This is a new era for parks in BC, and actually there's another connotation I think we can take, that it's a new era in BC for park usage. That is, how do you start out with a pristine area and maintain it in that state?
You use the word park, but this is something different from the park as we understand, say, Stanley Park or Garibaldi Park. How do you define that difference, Art?
Well, this is a wilderness park, really, and we've only given it the rather arbitrary status of park, which has a connotation of people use, of course, and indeed this will be used by people. In fact, it has been used by people. This is the Hartman family. The Hartmans are from Nelson. They have taken their whole troop of 4 children into this wilderness area before it became a park here this spring. But this is wilderness in the truest sense of the word. As I said, there aren't even any trails into this area, and how to develop this park with trails and minimize the impact of people, of ourselves really, on this area, to try and maintain as closely as possible the pristine nature of the wild fauna and flora.
Would these mountain goats here, for instance, be protected at all now by the new designation
Oh yes,
of that
this is a
area?
Class A park, and there is no hunting allowed in this park. So these mountain goats will be more approachable too.
They seem to be quite approachable there.
Well, approachable in one's belly, that's how this was done.
Yeah.
These are actually a hunted population, or have been a hunted population in the fall hunting season in the past. In the future, not having this hunting pressure will make them much more approachable, as they are in our other parks where wildlife is protected from hunting.
Yeah.
This is a small park, though. Only 22,000 acres is really not a very large chunk, for instance, of the Purcell Range in its totality. A huge wilderness area of some 2 million acres.
I noticed that the Hartmans are building their fire here on a rock, and it looks like a pretty good idea.
It is a good idea. The Hartmans are very careful, leaving no trace in a campsite or a lunch stop like this of their passing. They would not build a fire on the delicate alpine tundra here because it leaves a hole that wouldn't heal over for many, many years.
Yeah.
Whereas on a rock, they can wash it off and there's no
Now,
trace
what do we have here, a porcupine?
Yes, that's an old porky up an alpine larch. It's just a fascinating creature because he's quite easily approached by the children here. He's what I like to call nature's often maligned forester, because the porcupine, living off the bark of trees, thins out a forest. When a young forest comes up, it's very thick, and the porcupine goes through and eats off the bark and kills a certain number of the trees and thins out the forest.
What time of year is this, Art?
This is midsummer in late July. It depends on the year, of course, how fast the snowpack goes off.
Yeah.
You notice that the whole family is wearing, oh, here we have a pika.
Oh, that's a pika. He has several names, isn't it? Coney?
Yes,
Pika.
rock rabbit.
Rock rabbit.
It's a cute little fellow. Has a very piercing cry.
Now, do these lakes have names? Are all the lakes named in the area?
This is Price Lake, and this has been named for many years. There are only 2 lakes out of the some 40 lakes in this small park that have names, Price and Spade. But now the Park Service has given names to some of the rest of them, named after old trappers and guides. Historical names, for the most part.
Is there very much wilderness left in British Columbia?
Yes and no. We've got the tools now, you see, to change wilderness, to modify it very quickly. Where 20 years ago, it took quite a while for the wilderness to deteriorate. And here in the Purcell Range, where this small park has now been designated, we have the largest chunk of wilderness left in southern BC. It's on the order of 2 million acres of extant wilderness still left there. So the St. Mary's Park is part of this.
Now, is what the Hartmans are doing here, is that typical of the kind of use that you see for this type of park?
Oh, yes. Yes, there'll be no motorized vehicles, no roads, or any of the like in this park. It will strictly be on foot travel, and they'll even be very careful about horse travel, allowing horse travel, because horse travel there's very little feed for them up here. These lakes are of glacial origin.
Yeah.
That is, they lie in the depressions formed by glaciers, and we're looking here at some striations, that is, scratches made in the rock by the grinding of the glacier with rocks in its bed, which dug out the depressions that these lakes now lie in. These high lakes have only an invertebrate fauna of beetles and insects. Very interesting limnologically for the limnologist, because there's no fish predation bothering these
This is fascinating. What is happening here?
Oh, they have a nice little method of cooking their biscuits for supper. You just take along the biscuit mix in a plastic bag, dry, add a little water, and poke your stick in. Then everyone's responsible for his own biscuit, burned or unburned. But appetites up here are good, so burned or unburned, they eat them.
Biscuit on a stick.
You bet. Lisa's really enjoying that one.
This family looks as though they are quite experienced.
They are, but look at the age of these children is from about 7 to 10, and they're in there for 10 days, backpacked in, and it's a rough country without trails, I can tell you that. It's good mosquito country. All these lakes, the little ponds surrounding the lakes, are perfect production grounds for mosquitoes. In a dry summer, it's not so bad, but in a wet summer, it can be pretty awful. You can see the mosquitoes are very prevalent there. The kids don't want to get up in the morning, face another day of mosquitoes. And right by camp you run into a hoary marmot, or whistling marmot. They're the favorite food of the grizzly bear. There are hundreds of these large rodents all around.
Oh, this is a little creature that we encounter a great deal in climbing in BC.
Oh yes, oh yes. He's all over BC in the Alpine areas. Speaking of mosquitoes, there's the perfect place for them to thrive. Those aren't mosquitoes, by the way. Those are little tadpoles of the frogs, which live in these little ponds as well. But then the frogs have something to eat. It's all a symbiotic relationship between the creatures that live in this little aquatic environment. Nothing quite like a frog to capture the imagination of a child.
Are there any fish in these lakes?
No, there aren't, except for the lowest of the lakes, Spade Lake, which we don't cover here, but
what type are they?
Those are Cutthroat and Dolly Varden in Spade Lake, but these high lakes have no fish in them. They only have a small invertebrate fauna, as well as the frogs, of course, but Gordon, who is a fisheries biologist, recommends that they do not introduce fish into these high lakes, in fact, because the production would be so low and would destroy this invertebrate fauna. You can see them here. These are caddisfly larvae.
Yeah, they're excellent trout food, too.
Oh, yes. But at this high elevation, given the stress of predation by fish, they would last a very short time, and in only a couple of years, your fish production would be down to 1 pound an acre. This is an outlet to Price Lake. And along this freshet and waterfall area, we find a resident bird nesting. This is the water ouzel, or dipper.
The dipper.
Well known in many parts of BC as a riparian or riverside dweller. They live here year-round.
He's always there on the river.
Oh, yes.
The ouzel.
He may go down the river a bit in the winter when the upper reaches of a river system freezes over in the winter, but they stay right here. They aren't migratory.
No.
They nest right along these very rapidly flowing mountain streams. Notice the white membrane flashing across his eye.
Yes, what is the purpose of that?
That's something like a diver's mask. They're diving under the water all the time.
Mm-hmm. Aren't they really looking for those caddis nymph that we saw
Yes, that's
a moment or two ago?
They're feeding on the caddis nymph and mosquito larvae.
Bobbing.
Now that's why he's called the Dipper. He does about 10,000 push-ups every day.
Did you find his nest?
Yes, we did. There it is.
Oh, yeah.
This is an unusual shot. I found many nests, and this is the only one I've been able to find out where it was
Oh, that's beautiful.
easily photographed.
I've never seen a water ouzel's nest.
Look at the mouthful of stuff there, and those voracious young, eh?
That's a precarious position to put a nest in.
It is.
For a rising river.
It is, if you have a fluctuating river.
Yeah.
And water ouzels, I've noticed many times that they do nest a little bit prematurely in the spring and get washed out several times before they finally, the river settles down to a constant flow.
That must be a well-considered decision, and we don't see all of the factors involved that the ouzel sees.
No.
You know, he's taking quite a risk there, or she is.
Oh yes, well you can see the distance to the food isn't very great.
What sort of people were interested in getting St. Mary's Park designated?
It was amazing. There are all sorts of people involved, and they're not just what might be termed eco-freaks or environmentalists. There is an increasing awareness, and this is one thing that we're trying to promote with films like this, an awareness with the public about the values that are disappearing quickly in wilderness that should be protected for posterity. The people that were involved in this were public servants, the civil servants, also loggers, miners, people who use the area exploitively, really, who extract resources. These people were interested in there being a park there. There were even people, I know of one lady in Kimberley who is crippled. She'll never get into this park. Never. She has no means. She's all right. But she's very concerned about its being there for her children. But even just conceptually, that there's a wild place on the map, that her children or someone can exercise the option of going there. And that's an important point, that it's not only the user who actually utilizes these wild park areas or wilderness areas, whatever you'd like to call them. It's everyone, really. I believe the Hartmans now go on to a different trip we made into the area strictly for climbing. This is a quite high lake, about 8,000 feet, with ice still on it here in August, late August. Ice still floating around in it, melting. You can see the bubbles coming out of the winter's ice. And the overflow from the lake spilling over a waterfall down to the next lake, Totem Lake, 400 feet below.
A 400-foot waterfall?
Yes. It's quite a waterfall. I call it Blue Ice Waterfall because in the wintertime when we ski tour in here, this is just a great blue cascade of ice.
This would be a beautiful area for cross-country skiing.
It is. It's excellent. Very excellent. This is a tundra, really an Arctic tundra here at this elevation of 8,000 with small plants. This is spotted saxifrage, little white plant there growing. That's the spotted saxifrage again. Have a very brief period in which to bloom and carry out their life cycle here in the summertime.
How long does this sort of season last here?
It's rather brief, 6 weeks to 8 weeks before the winter snows begin to come again. This is a rock ptarmigan and her one remaining chick. I don't know what disaster befell the rest of them. Notice how well she's camouflaged in her summer plumage there. They change plumage in the fall to pure white for the winter. Camouflaged against the white mountain heather. This is Phyllodoce. One of the lakes is named Phyllodoce Lake because it's so prolific around that lake.
And a great bumblebee there,
oh, yes,
pollinating.
It's also swamp laurel, another one of the heath plants. Grows here, and pink mountain heather, which is called cassiope.
Do many people go into this area now?
No, very few people do go in here now, and in fact it is a pretty rough trip in. But the Parks branch wants to develop it in a very sane way with primitive trails, good for foot travel, but primitive, and they'll probably even limit the number of people per day that are going to use this area so it isn't overused, abused, and trampled as some of our other provincial parks have been, such as Assiniboine and Garibaldi.
That's a magnificent view from there.
Oh yes, rather precipitous. We're climbing up Trinity Peak, has a triple summit, and they've called it Trinity Peak. This is probably the first ascent that we did. No one else has ever climbed this peak. There's no sign of anyone's ever having been there on the summit, at any rate. We did make the summit. He's being protected by the rope running through that snap link attached to the rock. But the climbing does ease off. You can see Price Lake 2,000 feet below his feet there. Ice still floating around here in August, late summer. It's a mountaineer's coil, quick and easy and safe. From here, the rock climbing becomes much easier, so we carry on without the protection of the rope for the last 200 feet of the climb.
Did the whole family do this?
No, these are some mountaineering friends of mine with whom I was doing this filming. The Hartmans didn't attempt this. This is granite. It's really good, hard climbing rock, very nice climbing rock, similar to that in the Bugaboos, also in the Purcell Range, some 60 miles north of here.
Now, you're a geologist, Art.
Yes.
What is the age of this area, the geological age of it?
There are, the rocks in the park itself are part of the White Creek batholith, a large granitic intrusion of Mesozoic age. However, the majority of the rocks in the Purcells are much older than that, Precambrian, 1,200 million years old. These
What
are
is-
only 200 million in here. We turn back to the lakeside, to our camp after climbing the peak. An afternoon thunder shower. just
How does
finishing
the
up.
weather fluctuate in that kind of...
In the summertime, you do get the very common and frequent afternoon thunder showers.
to get snow?
Oh, you might on the in the very high areas. So this is the St. Mary's Alpine Lakes Park, one of 10 new parks in British Columbia, still in its pristine state.
That's a beautiful film, Art. Thank you for showing it to us. I'm sure your message came across very, very clearly.
It's been my pleasure, Ben.
You've been listening to a conversation between Ben Metcalf and naturalist and photographer Art Twomey. They were discussing St. Mary's Alpine Park in southeastern British Columbia. Thank you for being with us. I'm Stan Peters, and that's Klahanie for this week.